Good evening, friends. Welcome to my humble abode. Well, it's cold. That's the weather report from southern Indiana. It is cold. Fall is here. It's currently, I think, 40 degrees. It's going to get down to 29. Well, I was thinking about making this video tomorrow, Halloween night, but the weather report's even less favorable then. So I figured tonight was the night. I'm out here in a little garden shed out here. Pardon the mess. I got my Coleman going out here. Tonight I'm smoking my Meerschaum Cutty. It's an old one, no idea who made it. It could be English, it could be French, it's hard to say, but it was probably made about 1890, 1910, that general area. Smoking Sleepy Hollow again, because of course. What else would I smoke the night before a Halloween night? Love Sleepy Hollow. Well, tonight, in honor of our time of year we are having in the holiday of Halloween, I have a ghost story for you folks. And I am willing to bet that none of you have ever heard this ghost story, because this ghost story is from my area of Indiana. That's right, this is a ghost story specific to southeastern Indiana. And what makes it even better, this ghost story is, to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my historical research, true. And I'll let you listen to it, and you can take from it what you will. Before I start the story, let me give you some historic background. I used to live in Brookville, Indiana. It was in Franklin County, in the Whitewater River Valley. And the story takes place in Laurel, Indiana, which was in northern Franklin County. In the 1840s, Laurel was platted in 1838, or 1836, excuse me. In 1843, the Whitewater Canal Company came through Franklin County, digging a canal that was supposed to go from Cincinnati to Indianapolis, but it ended up going from Brookville, Indiana, the county seat, all the way to, oh dear, I can't remember, I have to look that up again. A point not too far from Richmond, Indiana. Anyway. So much for the historical facts. Let's get down to the story. When the Whitewater Canal was announced in the late 1830s, it caused quite a stir amongst the citizenry of southeastern Indiana, and many men and women saw a great business opportunity in the canal, which it was, of course. You need to start blowing the smoke off to the side. Anyway, so there were multiple businesses built, many of which are still present. In 1838, a gentleman who history has sort of forgotten his name. In the story, there's been multiple variations of his name, but he built a large house that was directly beside the canal route. He constructed it and finished construction in 1838. And it was a large white brick structure, and it was came to be known as Whitehall. And he operated a tavern and an inn out of the building, so it was known as the Whitehall Tavern. Well, it operated almost up till the turn of the century, as a matter of fact, 1880s. Anyway, the story. In the late 1840s, during the California Gold Rush, many people, of course, were traveling west, and the Whitewater Canal was one leg of the journey for many people. So, one day there was a young lady and her husband. The young lady was pregnant. She was going to have a child, and she was very near her due date. And her husband was eager to get to California because he wanted to find gold, and also it was getting kind of late in the year, and so he wanted to get out there before winter set in, and that was not a good situation for a woman who had just had a child to be in. So a discussion was had, and it was decided that the woman should stay at the inn there in Laurel, the Whitehall Tavern. They would provide her a room. Husband paid for it for several months. And then in the spring, she would go out west to meet her husband. She would send for him, or he would send for her, pardon me. Well, her husband went on out west, and a couple weeks later, the lady gave birth to a little girl. Well, the baby was not overly healthy, and the mother wasn't either. She was fairly weak as well. But hope was put forth that both of them would recover quite nicely. Well, the winter set in, and the woman was feeling very despondent. She missed her husband, and the baby wasn't doing well. The baby was very, very sickly, very weak. And as a result of her child's condition, she started going down health-wise. She started falling into poor health. Well, time went on, and the baby developed colic, which is, of course, a breathing condition and very painful, and the baby they cry a lot. Well, the baby was crying constantly for days. Not much they could do for it back then except for hope for the best. The baby would cry and cry. The mother would try to comfort it as much as they could, and that's all the guests in the inn would hear for days, is the baby crying upstairs and the mother trying to comfort it. Well, one day or one night, the crying stopped. The mother came down to breakfast the next morning. They all asked her where her baby was and how it was doing, and she wouldn't answer. So all the men went upstairs and looked for the baby, and they couldn't find it anywhere. It was gone. They questioned her. The law was called. There was a law enforcement officer in Laurel at that time in history, remember, about 1850. Law was called. The woman wouldn't answer any questions. And a few days later, she died as well. She passed away. So they buried her in the church cemetery out there. It was fairly close to the Whitehall Tavern. And they thought that was probably the end of it. A couple days later, the crying started up again. There wasn't any baby in the tavern, but the crying was going on. It would go on all hours of the night. All the guests could hear it quite plainly. It was a very obvious thing. It wasn't just one or two people heard it. Everybody who stayed at the tavern heard the crying. and it went on for years. I have found newspaper articles up to about 1910, so 60 some odd years later, that alluded to it. The tavern was vacant and abandoned in 1910, and one of the newspaper reporters visited it and walked along and said that the windows were all busted out of it and it was in bad shape. And they said something to the effect of the haunting was the reason it was vacant. They never could keep a tenant in there anymore. And if anybody would offer to tear down the tavern, the owners would be quite happy to let them do it, and they would let them keep the materials in the bargain. So it was a well-publicized haunting. Now I would liken it to the Bell Witch haunting in the 1820s. Amazing thing about the story. And it was multiple things. The tavern was multiple things over the years. It was a restaurant for a while. It was a antique shop in the 50s and 60s. A lady lived there and sold pies in the 70s. So it was in use over the years, but it fell into bad disrepair. In the late 1990s, a gentleman bought it. I do not know his name, but he purchased the tavern, and he started to renovate it because he was going to use it as a home. He was going to live there. Well, when he started tearing into one of the rooms upstairs, he was pulling the plaster and lath down, and he found a hole behind the chimney. In one of the upstairs bedrooms. And he found in the hole, wrapped in a blanket, the skeleton of an infant. The police were called at that time because they didn't know what the world it was about, and some of the older residents remembered the story about the baby crying and the haunting, and so the investigation concluded that that was the baby that they couldn't find in the 1840s. And then, in 2006, the tavern was burned to the ground and it was ruled an arson. And if you knew that area as I did, you would see just how you could believe that. So, picture quality is a little smoky. Well, anyway. So that's the story. The Ghost of Whitehall Tavern. And I actually drove by there last week and got pictures of where the tavern was. They had tore down the brick exterior. The fire gutted the building. It caused the second floor to collapse in on itself. And so they tore down the walls, filled the basement in, but they left the front porch. I understand they're going to rebuild the tavern, try to rebuild a replica of the original building. At least that's what I understand. But you know, small towns, there's a lot of gossip and it doesn't always amount to much. So that's the story of the Ghost of Whitehall Tavern, Laurel, Indiana. Now, I know I didn't tell it exactly in the creepiest way, but I just think it's neat because it's one of the few ghost stories I know that I can sort of verify by historical facts. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts are real. Personal experience of mine, on that note, I used to work for a jewelry store in Brookville, fixing clocks. And this place was built in 1881. It was an old brick store building, 3-story brick store building. And the upstairs, the 2 floors upstairs, were used originally as apartments for the family who owned the store. Very big 10-foot ceilings, oak paneling. It was beautiful. But the upstairs are kind of falling into disrepair. Lath and plaster were showing some places. The wallpaper was peeling off the walls here and there. They had the old knob and tube wiring with a single light socket hanging down from the twisted wire. It had a lot of the original fittings. It was really neat. But the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor still had power to it, electricity, so you could turn on the lights. The 3rd floor had no electricity to it. And the 3rd floor was in the worst disrepair. So it was creepy up there. But one day I went up there. Can't even remember why I was up there, but I went up there and I was walking along, and the blinds were up, so light was coming in, but it wasn't all throughout. The hallway was very dark up there. So I was walking along, just kind of admiring the oldness of the place. All of a sudden I got the strongest, most intense feeling I have ever gotten that I was being watched. In this hallway there were 3 doors that went into 3 large rooms. One the kitchen, one was the parlor, and the other was the sitting room. And then it came out in the hallway, big wide hallway, and then you would walk down the stairs to the 2nd and 3rd floors. All those doors were shut. So the only opening, I was alone in the hallway. I was going toward the stairs to go down, and I felt eyes on the back of my back. I spun around real quick, nobody was there. And I tell you, the hairs stood up on the back of my neck. I was thoroughly creeped out. And I backed up to the staircase. I was watching that wall. I backed up to the staircase because I had in the back of my mind, it may have been irrational, but I had in my mind, something's going to run up to me and grab me if I don't keep my eye on it. So I backed up to the staircase. The window was open, light was coming in. I felt much better. Walked quite quickly down the staircase. By the time I got to the 2nd floor, I was fine. I didn't have any bad feeling after that. It may have just been a weird feeling I had, but that is about the only time I've ever felt as though somebody was watching me where no one could have been watching me. Stuff happens, and sometimes you can't explain it. That's just a fact of life. Well, anyway, that's enough for tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I wish you all a safe and happy Halloween tomorrow. Enjoy trick-or-treating with your family or whatever you do. I am going to sit here and enjoy finishing my pipe. Hope the boogeymen don't get me. Hope they don't get you either. And I'll see you all next time. And once again, as always, this is Pipe Man 1861, thanking you very much for watching. Have a great evening. And again, have a safe and happy Halloween. Bye now.